Walker Middle Magnet. Today, I'm going to be telling you the story of Hansel and Gretel by the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, at the edge of a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and two children, Hansel and Gretel. Their mother had died when they were very young, and their new stepmother did not like them very much. One day, a great famine swept across the land, and the woodcutter and his wife could no longer afford to feed the family anymore. One day, the stepmother suggested that they abandon the children in the woods to fend for themselves on sticks and berries, or else they would all starve, and there was no sense in that. At first, the woodcutter was horrified, but eventually he was persuaded into her plans. They agreed to take the children out the next morning. Meanwhile, Hansel and Gretel were listening to the entire conversation. Hansel quietly crept out to the garden, gathered a few small pebbles, and went to sleep. The next morning, the children were taken out into the forest, and every few feet, Hansel would stop to drop one of the pebbles to mark his trail behind him. Deep in the woods, their father built them a fire and promised to return later. Both children went to sleep, and were not surprised when they awoke in the middle of the night and found that their parents had still not returned. But they simply followed the trail of moonlit stones all the way home, to their father's delight and their stepmother's dismay. Their lives continued on as normal until about a year later, when famine struck again, and the stepmother once again suggested that they abandon the children in the woods. At first, their father protested, but he was eventually forced to agree, and they agreed that they would take the children out the next morning. But Hansel and Gretel were eavesdropping again. But when Hansel went to sneak out to the garden, he found that the door was locked, so he went to sleep. The next morning, Hansel and Gretel were each handed a slice of bread and taken out deeper into the woods this time. But Hansel crumbled his in his pocket and left a trail behind him as he walked. The children were taken deeper into the forest this time, where their father built them a fire and promised to return later. Hansel and Gretel went to sleep and woke up alone again. But when they went to look for the trail of breadcrumbs, they found that it was gone, for the birds had eaten them all. So they wandered the woods for 3 days, lost, hungry, and alone, until they finally stumbled upon a giant gingerbread house covered with candy. The children began to eat the house, when suddenly the door creaked open and an old woman stepped out. At first, the children were terrified, but the old woman invited them inside and gave them good food and a place to sleep. But the old woman was really a witch with an appetite for children. As they slept, she decided she would eat Hansel first, so she grabbed the boy and threw him in a cage with iron bars, and for the next few weeks forced Gretel to feed him the best meals, while she got only scraps. Each day, for the witch was blind as all witches are, she would have Hansel poke his finger through the bars of the cage so she could feel how fat he was getting. But Hansel cleverly caught on to this and held out an old chicken bone instead. For weeks, the witch marveled at how skinny he was staying, when finally she decided to eat Gretel first instead. So she lured the girl into the kitchen and told her to preheat the oven while she prepared the dough. When the dough was ready, she said to Gretel, "Stick your head in there to feel if it is hot enough," and planned to push her in. But Gretel was too clever for this and said, "But how am I to do that? The door is far too small." The witch said, "Nonsense, see, even I can stick my head in," and she demonstrated by pulling open the door and leaning in. Gretel took advantage of the opportunity and shoved the witch inside. She slammed the door, and with a great flash, the witch was dead. Hansel quickly ran to free her brother, and after taking big bags of jewels found in the witch's house, they wandered the woods until they once again stumbled upon their own home, where their father was living alone since their stepmother had grown ill and passed away. With the jewels found from the witch's house, Hansel, Gretel, and the woodcutter were never hungry again, and they lived happily ever after. The end.